Hello, welcome back to another Pen Talk. Thanks for tuning in to my channel in the phenomenally large world of YouTube videos. Today, we're going to be looking at a Jinhao 601, which I was reluctant to actually acquire one of these, but I did a review on the 75, which we'll look at a little bit later. And my viewers asked me about the 601 and a 601A. So this one caught my attention because it's pretty much over the top from my view. Not an aesthetic that I look for, but since I wanted something completely different than the 75s, I went for this one. So it is engraved at the bottom of the cap, laser engraving, and we do have a 601 on the back, so there's no confusing what model this is. And that pattern on the cap and barrel is nice, you know, if that's what you like. But I think the plating is just too bright. In my days of costume jewelry, there was probably a lot of nickel layer put down before the gold was put down, and that tends to make the gold be bright. And maybe the alloy that they plated this with also had some elements in it that just increased the brightness. It's a pull-off cap. It pulls off a little bit. It takes a little bit too much energy than what I think it should. It does snap to close. So that is secure. If anyone are worried about a pull-off cap being problematic, this one certainly will not be. We'll see that section is just a knurled, kind of like a classic metal knurling done, but it is plastic. And there's seems to be threads there, but they're really just to facilitate the capping, or it could be aesthetics, I don't know, but they're not real threads, they're concentric rings. Nice two-tone number 5 standard Jinhao fine nib with that standard Jinhao plastic feed, which is probably in 1 billion pens. The barrel unscrews, and you could just spin it to unscrew it, and we see that metal piece here that holds the converter in place. Metal ring here at the bottom of the section. They're not connected. They're just kind of like the bottom one is more decorative than functional. Standard Jinhao converter, which is very secure in there. There's a long distance when you insert it, so that's a high-end quality that a lot of people look for in a pen. It's a converter like this one, you know, cartridge converter design. So that's the pen. Here I've pulled the nib and feed. When I look at this section in here, I can see a little dab of glue. So even though that's a standard nib assembly, which should unscrew, it doesn't. But fortunately, with a little effort, I was able to pull the nib and feed. And I always like these Jinhao feeds because it's a pretty good channel there down the middle. You have a few of those fins that touch the channel to facilitate the flow. It's not as complex as a lot of other feeds, and I think that's why it works well. The nib is a standard number 5 fine nib. What makes it a little bit different is it's a two-tone. Maybe the first one of those that I've seen, you know, has that chariot emblem on it. Here's the cap. We're going to explore this with the LED X-ray light. Here we are with some diffuse sunlight coming in. It's a rainy day today, so it's a good day to do videos. If I bring in the LED to play on it, it doesn't really add much. I mean, it's a nice pattern. That gold plating is a little bit too bright for my taste. If we look inside, we'll see a plastic liner. And we'll also see down at the bottom a brass screw, which holds in that top finial and the clip. I'm glad to see they've gone to brass. Hopefully that won't corrode. And as we can see, there's no threads. It's a push-on, pull-off cap. Now we're going to bring the barrel into play. And we'll also see inside of here plastic liner It appears to pretty much go fairly a long ways down the barrel. There's a little smaller piece down there, smaller diameter, which I think helps hold that converter in place and stop it from rattling, which sometimes irritates people. It has a plug at the end, which every one of these pens do. That's my view of the 601. And in case we didn't show you, the 601 is engraved on the bottom of the cap and Jinhao on the other side. So the silver and black pens are Jinhao 75s, and the middle one is the 601. They both have stylized arrow clip, insert there into the finial, plastic insert, the same type of hole and plastic insert at the bottom. They're identical in size. The Jinhao 75s just have Jinhao on the cap band, but no model number on the back. They're all pull-off caps. We'll look more closely at the 601 versus the 75 in this finish. And there, instead of these concentric rings, it's just one smooth section, which I prefer. These aren't sharp, and the step up you don't feel, so you can really hold this anywhere. But that knurling and the transition to those concentric rings certainly give you a different tactile feel when you're writing. There we have that black, they call it titanium coated number 5 Jinhao nib. It's the same nib, same stamping, same tipping material. So that's how they look from that perspective. Inside the caps, they're both the same inside. They have a plastic liner. They have a brass screw at the top, which holds in that finial. So overall, what's the difference between these two? I'm hard-pressed to tell. No ink called out to me, but I looked through my Pen BBS inks, and this one I thought would be appropriate because it has like a gold glitter. You shake it up, it gets into suspension. It's an interesting color. It's kind of in the green family. Let's see how it works in that nib. My experience with these branded Jinhao converters is they work very, very well. That's a very full fill, and you can see some of that glitter as it separates out, but it easily goes back into suspension, so just normal writing will keep it in suspension. That knurled section is a little bit difficult to clean up when you get some ink on it, but it did clean up okay. So now the real question is, how does that nib put down this ink? So the Jinhao 601 writes exactly the way I expected it to. It's smooth. It lays down a good line. You can write in any angle direction. It's very accommodating. It's consistent. And here's the Jinhao 75, which writes exactly the same way. And I've had the 75 for a couple weeks now. I uncap it. It writes first time every time, so I'm expecting the 601 to do the same thing. I like this Pen BBS ink. It's just a nice, interesting color. And the glitter doesn't show out that much, but you need to catch the right angle. So it's nice to me with those glittery inks when they're not that obvious, but more subtle. So let's talk a little bit about these pens. So the first thing to say about this line of Jinhao pens is they're all good writers. And there's a phenomenal variety of these pens. Here's some 601s that I found. I'll give you a link to my review on the 75 model, and you'll get to see that great variety of pens. And if you want more detail on the 75 model, I suggest you watch that video. These are too close to call them different pens. To label one as 75 and one as 601, I can't find any justification for that. They're all variations of a metal pen, all made the same way, same dimensions, same cap liner inside the cap, pull-off cap. The 601 has that strange, concentric rings on the section, which I'm not a fan of. No reason for them. They could have had the same type of section like the 75, but then it wouldn't be a 601, would it? Overall, these are not low-end pens and certainly not high-end pens, but they certainly are attractive, and I really like the variations that they've done. An all-black model, this nice silver check model, and the gold one, which, if you like gold, it's a really gold pen. They vary in price quite a bit. On eBay, these are all about $9. On AliExpress, I think I bought one of these for like $4 US, or maybe even less than $4 US, which to me is a great deal. They're going to vary, and some may be over $10, but they're all, to me, in what I would call an affordable price category. They write well for their price point. They feel okay in the hand, and if you like one of these pens and you like to get an everyday carry that you can depend on, I recommend these. Now let's rate the 601, and I'm going to give it an 8.6. It gets one check for the nib, but it's nothing to write home about. This gold, it just doesn't feel good in the hand. In my hands, it's kind of a little bit slippery, and then all of a sudden you get to this section with that pretty deep knurling in it, and that just, the texture change is not something I like. And then in between are those rings. It's a small section. I'll give you those dimensions. And number 5 nib is fine. I really care about how a nib writes. I'm not really care about what size it is. Size doesn't matter when it comes to nibs, unless that's something that is important to you. So I just enjoy the way this nib feels on the paper. That's why I got one check for the nib, and that's why it's at an 8.6 instead of lower. It's made okay. I mean, there's a certain expectation level on a pen like this, and it meets that level of, quality, build. Everything fits together okay. I'm not a fan of how it caps and uncaps, but that's more of a personal preference than a criticism. Hopefully you've enjoyed this look at this 601 Jinhao. Again, I commented at 601 is a Wing Sung model number, which has been in use for quite a while and for a completely different line of pens, but who knows how they come up with those numbering systems. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have many great pen experiences and find a pen that you enjoy writing with, and write with it. Put some ink on paper. Send a letter. Yeah, it's a nice rainy day. I'm going to be writing a few letters today. So we've reached the end of this video. I hope all of you are staying safe, happy, and healthy. We're going to say bye until the next video. And that is a very consistent writer, and that's something that is of value.